Hello, and welcome back to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast, where we explore the ongoing journey of recovery and the spiritual growth that comes with it. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hey everyone, it's Paul from Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast with a quick note before we get started with this episode. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for an entire year now. It's been such an amazing experience getting to know everybody. We already have the majority of 2026 booked up and we have a lot of great guests scheduled. We don't make any money off YouTube or any of the other platforms. This podcast is completely self-supporting and we've spent a lot of money, time, and energy into it simply just because we love doing it. We're not trying to make a profit, but we are trying to cover our upcoming expenses if that's at all possible. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can make a contribution at our Venmo, which is Recovery Recordings 615. We'd like to keep this commercial free. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today is February 15th, 2026. This is episode number 101. And if you'd like to reach us, you can reach us at recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. You can also find us. We have a private Facebook page. Get on there and send us a request, or you can also get on there. If you're a member, you can also invite people. So feel free to do that. It's Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast, and we appreciate all the support we've been getting on there. My prayer today is that something spoken here touches someone's heart, draws them closer to the Spirit, and helps them receive strength needed to keep moving forward towards healing, hope, and renewal. I am super excited about today's guest. I have my lovely wife, Lisa, here with us, and two of our dear friends, our sponsors, actually. We got Renee E. Renee.
Hello.
And John E.
Hey. Cold, rainy Sunday of Nashville winter, hanging out.
Yeah, took care of our Sunday morning business and where we go to also fill up, and been making plans for our son's Army boot camp graduation and
Nice.
getting that stuff together for March, and just some exciting, cool stuff happening in our household.
Yeah, real busy, huh? Super busy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. John, and John's been, little John, y'all's son, he just went to boot camp.
Yes, he did.
How's he doing?
Well, going in as a 27-year-old married person with, married man with two little kids, was a lot different than, putting him on a bus at 18.
Yeah. Wow.
He's going through some different things that maybe a younger kid wouldn't, but he's holding
great.
strong. He's doing great. He's doing absolutely great.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. John, how does this make you think about your little stint in the military? I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah, I was at a retreat last weekend and we were talking about character defects and I was sharing it's amazing how we project our own crap, on other people.
Yeah.
And now that he's, more than halfway through, there's nothing stopping him. And there was nothing stopping him before, but the first week or two, I was so full of fear, that he would quit or, find a reason not to finish or something like that, which is all, no indication of his character, just my crap,
Yeah. Get it.
But, we do that in relationships as well. You've seen it if you magnify the example, someone who is super untrustworthy of everybody, who always thinks somebody's out to screw them, is usually screwing somebody. You know what I mean? Like they're the ones who, and just noticed doing that with him. So, but it's been a exciting journey. It's really proud of him. Couldn't be more proud.
And I have to, really give credit to my daughter-in-law. I knew him missing his wife and his kids would be the number one thing that would cause him to rethink what he was doing. And she has been a rock star. And I as a mother-in-law, that is a new relationship in my life, and navigating that as a sober woman who wants to be the best mother-in-law that I can possibly be. It's been quite a beautiful gift to watch her support my son in that number one woman in his life. I took the back seat when they got married.
Nice.
And it's just been wonderful to watch her take care of my son that way.
Nice. Well, and that's so I was sitting here thinking earlier. I was thinking about you two had met, like you'd been sober a handful of years whenever you two met, right? So for the listeners, we're calling this episode "Boy Meets Girl on Campus," and it's about relationships. And John, go ahead and
yeah. So I was at Renee's first meeting back.
Well, I never stopped going to AA. But my first time when I surrendered for my sobriety date, March 21st, 1992.
Yep.
I was coming to AA for 3 years, not totally abstinent.
Yep. She walked into an AA club and was crazy and toxic and instantly had the hots for her.
How old were you all at the time?
Oh, you got a calculator?
In your early 20s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm much younger than she is, so I had to
Stop.
figure that out.
No, so I was 24.
24, yeah.
I was 24 because I hadn't had Brenna yet. I was 24 and you were 20.
I think close to that. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It's not quite right. But anyways.
Well, I had Brenna at 25.
Well, we don't need to
and I was a
figure this
year
out.
sober.
So, so I was at her first meeting and she was married to somebody else and I was engaged to somebody else. And the big joke is that it just took a little time to God to get rid of all that nonsense. And her husband and my fiance and us, we were a friendly couple. I mean, we went to, did some activities together and they came to our house and played cards and stuff. And I had a usher back out of our wedding and he filled in and
I handed out programs at his first.
My,
and I got all the, I used the lint brush to get all the lint off his tuxedo.
Yeah. And, but my first wife left, just shy of a year or something like that, being married, a little bit after a year, actually, now that I do the math. And Renee and I shared sponsors and
they were married.
And then they had both suggested we go see the same therapist, and we did that. And
when you say shared sponsor, what do you mean? Shared sponsor?
Couple. We didn't share a sponsor.
Yeah.
Our sponsors were married.
Okay, gotcha.
Charles and Judith. Charles just died sober this summer with 3,000 years, and Judith is, I imagine, still sober. She had a couple months more than I did, which always kind of bothered me. But good people and
great people.
Yeah, great AAs and. So yeah, we as soon as all that kind of got settled, we started dating in March of '94, and
I have a card that he gave me for my second anniversary.
Yeah, and then got married, and this October will be 30 years. AA's been keeping us together, and
nice,
sober, and
nice.
Yeah,
it's funny because I where my mind was going with it earlier was the fact that, so me and Lisa have met y'all over the last few years, right? And it's funny to think about, y'all years ago, 20, 30 years ago when you first walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. Probably, I couldn't imagine how much y'all have grown from, not even having the ability to consider someone else versus, 30 plus years, what it looks like today, right? And so that's kind of where my mind goes with this. And
we would have screwed it up without proper guidance from both some good AAs and a really good therapist, really more than
she was
than the AA couple. I mean, they were great, but we were just both seekers and wanted the same thing, and
our ideals matched.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we, but like any hot to trot new AA couple, I mean,
with zero
yeah.
intimate relationship skills.
Yeah, no relationship skills. I mean, my wife left on a Monday, and we went on our first date on a Wednesday. And,
yeah.
And I had a 6-month-old infant.
Yeah, she moved in the following Friday. It was maybe not like officially moved in, but AA moved in, get your glad bag full of garbage, put clothes in it, and type of deal.
Well, and I had this little baby too. It wasn't like I could, I was working full time and I had this infant.
I say that joking. I mean, she didn't like move in, but just you go from kind of zero spending time together to infatuation first, which we all do. But thanks to our therapists and sponsors, we were really had in our head that we were going to keep our priorities straight and AA first and God second and the baby third and each other fourth was the pecking order. And, I was cool with it. I mean, it's,
Well, quick question. So, like, I love how Renee just touched on. We shared the same ideals. That was something that I didn't even understand what an ideal was until I met John, like just 3 years ago, right? And we were having dinner one night when he'd asked me, like, we started talking about ideals, and this is like a new concept for me, So going back to the comment you just said, Renee, you talked about sharing ideals. Was this even something when you first met? Was this a principle or some kind of idea of what an ideal and how important that was? Was that even a principle or something that you had at that point?
I don't know if it was the vernacular from the 4-step ideals that we do at the end of that sex inventory. I don't know. I mean, I know that I was writing that part of the 4-step in the sex ideal, in the sex inventory. I know Judith had walked me through that. When him and I would have conversations, it probably was more guided from that. Our therapist, Lori was her name, up in Washington, D.C., and she was the head psych nurse of Sibley Hospital, and she was just, I'm telling you, she saved my life because she worked with me. And I like to always say this, AA could only take me so far. And my sponsor was smart enough and knew enough about some other stuff that I needed it too. So she set us up. I think those were the conversations that she would send us home to talk about, to build this foundation that was built. And we talked a lot about foundation that would be strong enough, just like when you get sober. Our relationship has its own, spiritual power.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I think to answer your question, like, we didn't know that's what was happening.
Yeah.
Neither one of us was smart enough or spiritually sound enough to say, okay, let's have an ideal conversation. And there's lots of talking, lots of conversations, and that's what happened in hindsight. But I just want to be clear, like, neither
we
one of us
had
are that.
very serious conversations about how, what we wanted in marriage, how the recovery part was going to mix, and how we were going to raise our children, and how we were going to take care of our families and our parents. And I mean, like, stuff very early on that were very important. Yeah. And I'll tell you, this is God's honest truth. I know our parenting ideals lined up so well. You think about the marriages and the people, how many times they fought over kids. We did not disagree on raising our kids until our third child was getting ready to go. The one that's in the Army was getting ready to go in to college. Okay, so we got 2 girls through college, master's program, law school after. Still parenting with same page parenting every time about whatever issue. My son didn't want to go to college, and I kept pushing. It was the first time John and our ideal about that didn't line up. He's like, he doesn't need college. And I said, no, he's got to go to college. And that was, that was the first time. That's a lot of years.
Wow, yeah. For the listeners, for anybody that may be listening that isn't even aware of what we're talking about when we talk about ideals, one of y'all want to, just brief description on what that even looks like for someone?
Well, as Renee mentioned, in the 4-step specifically, the ideals that are referenced there are, I think Bill says 5 times in a page and a half about shaping future safe and sound sex ideals. Right after we ask ourselves those 4 questions, it says, in this way, like, in what way? So in thinking about these questions that hopefully you've written down and answered, whom would we hurt? Where were we selfish? Did we arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What should we do instead? All that mess in what way can we not do what's on that paper? And so, both of our sponsors had us write out an ideal. I mean, like I said, Bill mentions it 5 times. Might be a good idea to write it down and, share it with somebody else just for not approval at all.
Something to aim towards.
Right. But the time, right. This is a long answer to your question, but an ideal is an operating system. What type of moral code, what type of operating principles do I want to live by to lead a better life? Because the opposite of that, the answer to all those questions is a disaster. And if I continue to hurt people, I'm going to get drunk, So, and that just, that extends into, typically, and you've experienced this, I know you take a guy through the 4th step and you say, all right, we're going to write our ideal and this is what we do. And they always come back with their ideal partner. Right. I want a woman that's, blonde and 120, and, sex freak and rich, like I'm being funny, but all these things about her and no. How do you want to live? How are you going to act? How are you going to behave to prevent, again, what's on that paper? And so it's just extending that to well, what type of marriage did we want? What type of, because we've all seen it, right? I mean, it's certainly just a reflection of society, but it's magnified in the fellowship is, we hook up right away, we ignore things that don't jive with us because the sex is great and we don't feel great about ourselves, and the companionship and the attention is a great distraction. I'd much rather enjoy that than go home and work on a 4-step or make some amends or, try to get closer to God. And then, after a while, right, the sex still may be great, but it's not as shiny, and, things that distract us wear off and we're stuck with the other person. And so if we have different ideals on how to raise kids or how to spend money or some of the big things, all breakups happen typically over fights over money, type fights over raising children, fights over God or religion. And, so when I say earlier, it was by accident, that wasn't by accident, but it wasn't our brilliant forethinking, oh, let's cover this base. We were forced to do that by our therapist and being shown how to do that.
A lot of pain, probably. Yeah.
Zero credit for that,
Tons of pain.
So. Yeah. I was just sitting here thinking about me and Lisa. All right. So when we first met, she probably had 7 or 8 months of sobriety, and I was around 6. And
you had about 5.
Yeah.
About 5.
It's funny that it's crazy to think about how by the grace of God, right? Because I had never even considered even a loving God wasn't even a concept. He was loving, but he was loving to fix me. It never was to be who I could, an ideal was who are me and God trying to bring to this table, right? It never was like that. It was more okay, God is this thing that I'm doing to center me and get out of my feelings, et cetera, right? And I would never consider other people. It was years into a relationship where I was holy crap, her feelings are freaking valid.
Yeah, it took a while before. I think that when you and I met, there was we didn't have a conception of a loving God. We didn't have a conception of anything outside of either one of ourselves other than exactly what John described of let me not feel anything that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And get me out of it as quickly as possible.
It was all about feelings.
It took a long time.
The basis of all that early attraction is what can they give me? What can they do for me?
Yeah.
And we don't say that out loud, but that's the reality. How does she make me feel and all the rest?
Yeah. Feelings was such a huge thing, and still are. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, I try. What I'm aiming towards is not let my feelings dictate every freaking decision I make. Right, and it goes into it wasn't until I really started getting into a lot of the principles and the traditions where I was even available. And also, I'll tell you this though. This is what a common thing that's happened over the last year was been. If I don't go. I had to go through the steps a handful of times before I really had a 7th step awareness. You get what I mean? Okay, it's not all about Paul today. You get what I mean? I think the first 2 or 3 times I went through the steps, it was still completely all about me. You get what I mean? And like, so I had no clue that I was, that was even going on until like years into my recovery, and I think that was a powerful experience to realize like, oh, okay, that's the problem. It's self showing up and just causing a shit show. You get what I mean? Renee, talk to us. What's on your mind?
I don't know why this came up, but I just remember hearing pretty early. I had my first daughter was born from the result of my first marriage that didn't last a year. That was another AA quick marriage after knowing him a month. But I had Brenna. So John and I started dating. I had a 6-month-old already, newly sober in the program I was. And so, it was never him and I just dating, getting to know each other. We had this beautiful baby. And I remember being out on a date one time with him, and my cousin or someone had Brenna, and he could just tell, that I was worried about her, thinking about her. And he said, you want to go we hadn't even eaten, I don't think, but he looked at me and he goes, you want to go get Brenna? And I said, yeah. And he goes, let's go, and it was the three of us,
I probably didn't have enough money for dinner. But.
It was the three of us. And
I get it. Yeah.
and the consideration that, it was shown, God's mercy and love was all in there, like beside, without our permission, and I remember what I want to say is I heard someone say your spouse needs to come first. Your husband should come first, then your children. And I always wanted to buck against that, like, oh no, I will protect my children. I will, and I don't mean in certain situations. I'm saying I understand that now today at where I'm in my life.
Like a unified front is what you're saying.
My husband and I have to come first.
Yeah.
Before the children, before, and I've not been asked, God has not required that of me to make a choice like that, maybe with some time slots or something like that. Sponsee, John and I have an agreement about that, but I'll tell you, whoever said that to me, I don't remember who it was, but I'm glad I had always had that, him and I's unity had to come first, or else that house would not have been run the way it was.
Yeah, John told me that. There would be situations where I was getting into, we had a disagreement or whatever, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, clearly I'm right about this. You get what I mean? And, like, my need to be right being way more important than our relationship. Or, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it's like, it ain't even about, like, how we're approaching, like, this whole parenting thing. It's about, like, there's a wedge being drawn in between us. Right? And I don't see that until, like, wow, okay, I'm starting to see it, So I get that, what you're saying. Lisa, talk to us. What's on your mind?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't I don't know. I was actually thinking about a couple of things. Sorry, I got caught off guard. I was waiting for a question maybe. I got caught off guard. I think that over the last couple of years, the way that for Paul and I, the way that our relationship has changed has been a direct result of God, number one, and learning how for each of us to get out of our own way. I think that Paul and I were, when we first got together, we were products of a halfway house. So we both got sober at a halfway house. We both had these sponsors. We were running to meetings and doing all the things every single day. We had the understanding of what John and Renee have described of, it's God, AA, us, and, family, whatever comes next, or vice versa, family. And we didn't have any problems in the beginning. There was not a lot of problems. There wasn't any situations. I can remember sitting in meetings and talking to my sponsees and my sponsor at the time, and we'd been married at that time for 2 or 3 years, and I was like, we've never fought. We've never fought. But then I realized it was because we weren't at that time applying any kind of principle to our relationship. We were stuffing it, right? Like, we weren't talking about this openness and honesty that John and Renee are talking about. We were stuffing our problems. We weren't sharing them with each other. We didn't know how to unite on a front together. because we had been taught to just take it to the sponsor and leave it.
Go get busy doing something else.
Get busy doing something else. Let's get busy doing something else. And so when everything finally snowballed somewhere around 3 or 4, 5 years into our relationship, us too, we were in counseling. Thank God that there was a willingness to go to, but it took me a long time to become willing to go to it because.
How long you guys been married?
Coming up on 7 years.
7 years, yeah. 7 years.
Yeah. Which is wild. I love her more today than I did when we got married.
That's a good answer.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I
Feel the
hope
same
so.
way?
Yeah. It's it's wild. It's wild how it happened. We finally had somebody. The concept of, did you talk to your husband about that? Was
Yeah.
no. Matter of fact, I did not.
I remember the look on your face when I said that to you. You were like, you didn't think you heard me correctly.
No, yeah, that's crazy.
Or what did he
It's
think about that?
absurd. No, it's none of his business.
Yeah.
It really was because that's what I had been taught in AA, mind you. Rather, it was, it wasn't what AA was teaching me. It was what I was being taught. I'm going to make sure that I say that.
Yeah. Which goes into like one of the questions you had was based off the
this
same
is a great
thing.
question right here. And this was like, how do we keep resentments from building up? Right? Like, so it's easy for me to have a resentment at my my neighbor, my coworker, my friend. And I'll go to Renee and I'll say, man, this X, Y, and Z happened. And she'll say, okay, let's take a look at A, B, and C. And we come up with a plan of action and we go over and we have the conversation and we go our separate ways. But when it's your significant other, for me, I see him every day. I talk to him every day. We go to work. We come home. We kiss the kiss on the cheek. Go to bed. How do we keep resentments from coming up? I know the book says, we could make fast action of this work, right? Is that what it says? It's hard for me to do that. It's hard for me to do that in a relationship because I'm like, well, I'd rather just act like it's not happening. That way it'll just save the fuss. So how do you guys make sure that you're recognizing these things as they're coming up and make fast action of reconciling them?
Well, I'll tell you this. Hold on one second, though. I'd like to add this. So for me, the married relationship at home together can be a little bit more tricky. It's one thing when I'm like pissed off at someone at work because they made a comment or did something, and I'm just like irate. But at home, it's like this low level, like shit's been piling up.
Vibration.
And I don't even realize it until like the end of the weekend. I'm just like, "Rrr." You get what I mean?
Sure.
Like it's way different in at home life versus like, oh, okay, so-and-so pissed me off and that's been on my mind for days. And now, it's rare that I'm like just irate at her.
You're talking about a different level of intimacy.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hearing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the person I have the most intimate, not just physically. I don't mean that in the physical sense. Yeah, so you're talking like the closest one to your center, the closest one to the soul. Actually, I believe, the way I believe it is that when we got married, we entered a covenant and we're one. So the phases of development with this, for me, is the most obvious because, the phases of development, we did not, it was not easy in the beginning because I'm a very passionate, very reactive, my feelings ran my life. It took a long time for that to calm down, but I can tell you if he's not okay and I'm not okay because we are one. I believe we are one. And if one of us is off in that house, the house isn't right. It just doesn't feel right. And that's not codependent. That is when you share intimate spiritual life together, because we do share a spiritual life together. It's not just the technical, physical living together, sharing money, sharing a house, sharing children, grandchildren now, and sharing a car or whatever. You're sharing a spirit, you're sharing your soul. Like it's a different level. So I'm not comfortable if we're not okay, and not in the codependent kind of way. And the tolerance for that as you stay here and you get closer to each other, I used to have a higher tolerance so you could maybe go a while. Now, immediately, we could have a exchange conversation And I'm, like this morning coming home from church, we had, and I thought it was beautiful how we talked through that. It was beautiful. No one needed to be right. I was really, and I really believe that he understood what I was saying, and it, I think, any insight to that about that, like the phases of development with that?
Yeah, I think at some stage in your life that, God, it's such an old man thing to say, but peace becomes more important than being right, and once, I love what Shoemaker says in Apologia for My Life. He says, once you've tasted God, nothing but God will do. And I don't think that means like you've learned the magic trick or the secret code of the Rubik's Cube, but like, I think that's as simple as saying once you've experienced some real peace, it's tough to tolerate anything else for very long. We do, right? I mean, I tried to share this story this last week, and I don't know if I did it any justice, but I'll try again. I haven't asked her permission to tell us, but she'll be all right with it.
If I say stop, you better stop.
I'll edit it out. I'll edit it out. Yeah.
In November was the corrections conference, and we had a house guest, Nicole F, a dear friend of ours, and Friday Renee was like, Nicole said Friday, will you make us chicken parm? I hear you make good chicken parm. I said, I'd love to make chicken parm. And so Saturday morning before they left for the conference for the day, I'm cooking my sauce, I'm frying cutlets the whole day, and they had a vote to where the conference was going to be next year or something like that. It doesn't matter. And so that was at 3:00. And so I figured, all right, that'll take an hour, and it's 4:00. I'll be home at like 5:00. And I'm like, that's perfect. Alabama game is 6:30, so now I've got some self-interest involved. And so by like 5:00, I haven't heard nothing from anybody. And now I'm like a 1950s disgruntled housewife. I've been home cooking and cleaning all day for you, where you girls at. And anyways, and so it's, the animosity started on text, like, what the F? And, my blood pressure started, and so I'll leave part of, it doesn't matter. But so they didn't get home till late. They didn't get home till 9:00, 9:30, I think. And so I ate my chicken parm by myself, all salty and everything. And again, we're talking about chicken parmesan, right? We're not talking about like, major offenses of life here. But I, self was involved. And so, of course, I'm looking for I'm hoping Nicole will like my chicken parm. She's an Italian. She knows what chicken parm is and isn't. Anyways, and so like at like 9:30, I'm in bed. The game was over. Alabama lost. That doesn't help. And I hear the garage door go up, and I'm like, I'm fighting the boiling, And I was just like, God, like, this is like, God, please help me be forgiving here. Like, I don't want to, there was a day in sobriety where like, I'd have been ready to fight. I don't care if your friend's here. I don't care if I embarrass you. Like, I'm going to tell you like it is, and certainly didn't want to do that. I never want to make someone feel unwelcome in my own home. And so I just like, just had to like beg God. I was like, just help me be forgiving here. This is not a big deal. We're talking about chicken parmesan. And it left me immediately. It really did. And then, and Renee came in and she, she fell on her sword. She owned her stuff. So really did. She owned her stuff. But the next morning it was back. They had to go back to the conference, and I was going to go see my grandkids in Kentucky. And my son was like, hey, bring me some chicken parm. And as I was filling up the, to-go bags to take them, I mean, 36 years sober, I'm thinking, all right, well, they're going to be here the girls are going to be here for dinner tonight, and they're going to want to have chicken parm. They didn't have chicken parm last night. I'm like, screw them. And I took all the chicken parm and took it all to Kentucky intentionally, right? Like, now I'm punishing. And off we went, and left them left him enough chicken parm for a month, and
Enough for a month.
yeah, and so like as I'm driving, as soon as I did it, and I'm like halfway there, I'm like, you're such a child, like don't even, and then instantly realize like, okay, let's make chicken. I'll make it again, and so like, which is, evidence of like, forgiveness is when you will bear the debt of somebody else. That's what forgiveness is. And so as silly as this sounds about chicken parm, like bearing that debt is to make it with as much smile and love and, energy as I did the night before, I didn't stop and buy any, ragu and, some nonsense like so, but I just had no, I hate when people say, create space or whatever, but like, I just had no tolerance for that lack of peace in my life. Like I do not want to be angry at anybody for anything. Like but that stems from, kind of being older and being in a little bit different season of life. And I mean, when I was 35 years old, like, I'd have been driving down, seriously, when I was 35 years old, if that had been happening, I'd be driving down the road, going through the child support calculator. Like how much are these 3 kids going to cost me? Like, I mean, not literally, but like, that's where that's where that mind goes, and, so I don't even know if I answered your question, but,
It definitely answered the question. And I was just thinking about, it brings us to the next one that I have. And Renee, you might be able to have some insight on this.
I want to add something to this real quick. Would you finish right there? Because I want to add something. So in my personal experience, and I'm not trying to like, I realize this is a recovery podcast. We're not speaking on behalf of any 12-step program. But I'll be honest with you, like until a few years ago, whenever it was Christ is really what changes all that for me. My personal experience, right? Because I've used like Eastern philosophy and all these other things to kind of get, in a certain space or whatever. But really, like it wasn't until I get into some of the parables and when Jesus would share like all these love that the Father has, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where I was like, holy crap, that wasn't even available to me until I really had a head-on collision with Christ. You get what I mean? And I'm not going to say it's always perfect. Like obviously, self still shows up all the time, but that space of that forgiveness, etc. Never, loving the unlovable. That wasn't even available to me until I met Jesus, right? And I'm not saying that trying to sell this idea. It's just my personal experience, right? So, which actually goes into one of the questions that Lisa was talking about earlier, which. What was it? Something along like our relationship with God and how that shapes. What was it?
What was it? Let me see.
What you're talking about is not the idea, but the practice of extending grace.
Yeah.
And that's
the Holy Spirit is what I like to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're called to do, right? Like it stems, I think, from, the beginning of the 4th step, this concept of, they like ourselves were spiritually sick too, TOO. And so it's really easy to overlook that ourselves part. I read that, they're spiritually sick. It's not what it says, and that transformation is like, all right, well, maybe I haven't committed, this mistake, but man, I've committed this one.
Yeah.
And I want grace and forgiveness and mercy from the world. And so,
and technically I'm spiritually sick when that's going on. I'm the sick man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh wow, I'm freaking, there's something blocked off from that grace, extending it, right?
Yeah, it's a childish, spiritually immature concept to think, well, I want mercy, I want grace, I want forgiveness, but you got to earn yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you don't even deserve it.
Yeah.
What was the next thing you said, Lisa?
Yeah.
There was a couple of things. The what you just about the chicken parmesan, what you just answered, is perfect.
I want to just share something, what was happening behind the scenes, I called my sponsor because it had been a while since I had been that inconsiderate to my husband. I do, I do work every day. I ask God, to make me a loving, caring, warm wife and see how God would use me as John's partner. And so it had been a while. It had been a long time since I was that inconsiderate. And so I talked to her, and Nicole and I talked on the way home. And Nicole, we get into the garage, and Nicole goes, I don't even want to go inside. You think it's going to be okay? And thank God, John asked for that power to come in, because what if it was a bad experience? What if he was slamming things? What if he had, and so she got to see, like, he got to be how we live our life is a program, it's a attraction, not promotion. And he got to actually show her it's okay to make a mistake, and a man would still love you. A man won't do that. And so, God gets a lot of credit for that evening, how it all played out, because she did say that. And so we never know. I mean, what an impact that could have had on her to know that it's okay to make a mistake.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Nice. Mm-hmm. Got another question?
Yeah, I do. What helps you trust spiritual principles over personal control?
Experience.
I suffer with control. Okay, I am a procrastinator and a control freak. So imagine those two things in the
That's
same
an odd mix.
being. Okay, I want all the things to go exactly how I want them to go, but I don't want to plan it. Not today. We'll wait till the day before or of. It's insanity. So, anyways.
So what makes you trust? Say again. What makes you trust spiritual principle
over personal control, right? Like letting go. For me, I'd be basically letting go of every single thing, go against every grain that I have, every fiber of my being.
I want to add something. For me, like, that depends on where I'm at, and like,
Sure.
if I'm spiritually sick, a principle is out the freaking window. Like, if I'm like engaged and like I got a solid ass case built, you can just kick the spiritual principle out the window, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I have to like get some friction before I'm like, oh, okay, fuck, all right, this ain't it. But like, when I'm in a solid space, like, when I'm spiritually sound, et cetera, like, it's just experience. I realized that, like, generally speaking, it's funny. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, I always thought spiritual principles was like, something that, like, I never wanted to apply a spiritual principle because I thought it was going to make their life better. You get what I mean? And really, it's like, it's as a whole, it just pans out better, right? But I mean, I'm not always, like, if I'm in a sick state of mind or whatever, like, and I'm feeding the self, I think spiritual principle, the idea of it is out the window for me.
Well, we have a hope here that we're living from a spiritual basis, and we don't get to that space of, needing the friction, like the chicken parm. God, help me. Yeah. Begging, please do not let me get up.
That's
out of this
an uncomfortable
bed.
Space. Right?
Yeah,
that's
sure.
very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let Renee answer, but I'll briefly tell you my answer is lack of choices. Mm-hmm. I mean, until self utterly fails you, then self is still a good idea. Mm-hmm. So, and then, and you guys have seen this in your own life. I don't have to point out the obvious, but like, you start trying these things. You're like, oh, this is a lot better, So, willingness to experiment coupled with an utter failure of your human will and human reason. It's a 6 and 7 question, really, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I that's what I was thinking about. God removes that. God, I don't have the power to see it, understand it, to see the bigger picture of what's happening. But I can tell you, I was an absolute micromanaged control freak of my children, the house, the holidays, the parties, every little detail, every little micromanaged. The Legos went in the Lego box, the Tinker Toys went in the Tinker Toys. And, I would not go to bed until the whole house was put together, no dishes in the sink every night. And it dawned on me at one time, but my husband's going up to go to bed alone, while I'm down here doing all this while the kids went to bed. And it's like I had a choice, I wanted to be, and so God will remove these things. And I will show up differently, and I will give you I believe in, current stuff and stuff that you discover not just from when you got sober, but somewhere along the line, I wasn't going to micromanage Christmas. I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to do all the things that I did that I thought stressed everybody out. And I hated that Christmas. It was not special the way I like it. It wasn't enjoyable to me. And so I learned something. And the kids and people were like, well, what about this? What about this? So they, so like it was, God will continually disclose what I think is controlling. No, it was just the way I was making Christmas special for the family. It wasn't, I thought it was control, but it wasn't. It was tradition stuff that I had been doing for all these years. So I might think it is something, but it's really not something.
Yeah.
Getting rid of some old ideas.
Yeah. I love that. I'll tell you this, like I got to a space in 6 and 7 really was like the guy that I was bringing into my relationship was just unbearable. You get what I mean? Like I realized that the person that I wanted Lisa to have as a husband, I didn't have it in me. You get what I mean? Like I'm selfish, self-centered to the core, like not considering all kinds of stuff. And this is several years ago. Hey, and I'm still like, don't get me wrong, I'm not freaking perfect, obviously, but like I got to this space where I was like, wow, like, I've seen it for the first time where I was like, man, I am extremely inconsiderate sometimes with good intentions. You know what I mean? Like the absolute best intentions, trying to be this, etc. But then like at the end of the day, it was like, wow, like I was being extremely inconsiderate. Does that make sense? And I realized like it wasn't just once or twice. What happened? It happened a handful of times in 2 or 3 different months, right? And that's where I got to that space where I was like, holy crap. Like, that's where I really started seeing how important, again, what I call the Holy Spirit, how important that was to try to bring into the relationship some grace, right? And I didn't have it, These are qualities that I just didn't naturally possess.
Right.
Yeah,
I get that. I mean, I didn't come near to have the ability to possess, some of that stuff, or not even possess it, just practice that stuff, for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean,
it wasn't even an idea.
Yeah, and the religion that I grew up in, that I practice outside of anything else, it's you pick a saint, a patron saint, and my patron saint is Mary Magdalene, which was Jesus's best friend, and she was a prostitute and a sinner, and he loved her, and she would keep making mistakes, and he just loved her more, and so. I can't ask God to love me like that if I'm not willing to love, the forgiveness for the things that I had to ask for were some pretty heavy, big things. I had to ask God to forgive me for something that, it was really a big sin. It was really a big guilt, shame, and remorse for me. And so I can't label that more or less than any other forgiveness. Forgiveness of not considering my husband is not any less or more than that big, huge sin I did against God. And so, I know I've been forgiven, so who am I not to forgive the next person?
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah. You just made me think of like one of the common things me and John have talked about over the last few months has been like being able to receive. Right, that's so important. Right? It's like, how do I receive this? Because if I can't receive it, I can't give it. Right, and you want to touch on a little bit of that, John?
I wasn't going there. I know we have, but I don't know the example that you were talking, the conversation you're talking about. I just was on this, kind of forgiveness conversation of, because that's really the essence of a relationship. That's the essence of any union. Can't exist without that. If both, obviously, both people are fallible, and so without that gift of forgiveness, it's a sinking ship. And this is a I don't know what the right word is. Not a special time of year for us, but
Today. It's today.
I know it's today. That's why I chose this date when Paul asked, what day do you guys want to do it? February 15th is kind of a day when our marriage was put to test, I guess you could say. You guys know our story, and
18 years ago.
18 years ago, and when forgiveness was the building block for, and still is, of us rebuilding our marriage on more solid ground, So that's what I was thinking about when Paul was talking, because without forgiveness, and you can't have the ability to convey forgiveness without some personal, intimate knowledge of your own brokenness and the grace that's happened in your life. If all the greatness in your life has happened because of you, then it's really easy to condemn. I think 6 and 7 is you begin to really understand your own brokenness. Kind of as Richard Rohr would say, you learn to welcome your wounds. And if you don't learn to understand your own brokenness and welcome your own wounds, you'll have contempt for others' brokenness and their wounds. And that's, inventory, amends, prayer. I mean, this is what we have in the 12 steps is not unique to Alcoholics Anonymous. These are spiritual principles older than time itself, right? So, but that was, it's almost like a second wedding date for us this day. So I was excited that we were doing it today to kind of honor our marriage and honor what God has, and really the program has done in our life. I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous really saved our marriage. I was thinking, I don't know what we were doing last night and how the conversation came up. Oh, we were just watching some idiot show on Netflix, with a divorced couple. And I was thinking, man, I mean, just seconds and inches from, being divorced and having kids. And, I'm not saying you can't raise kids well being split up, all that, but, how devastating that would have been to our family and how different both of our lives would look today. And, we wouldn't be sitting here with you guys, for sure. And, that began with Renee's willingness to forgive a transgression in our marriage. And that sounds light, but I don't mean it to be. And the Holy Spirit working through her. So I don't know.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
And that was instant. I had a spiritual experience walking through my dining room, and it was instant. And I knew God had forgiven me because he had blessed me with 3 beautiful children. And I had no guilt or shame when I had those children. And I knew I had been forgiven. And who the heck was I to not forgive someone else?
Yeah.
And it was that day, that within an hour or two, and it was so powerful. It was life-changing. And so I really, I know that, I'm going to ask for forgiveness from others until the day I die. And if I can't give it, I can't ask. It might not, we don't get to put a level of what deserves, like what's a bigger forgiveness ask than the other. They're all the same.
Yeah.
Might not be maybe as big to you, but I'm still asking for it's. You don't get to put a value to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank God for coming up short, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier about
Thank God.
the importance of unity, in the way that every our relationships in the past had been so transactional, and what they look like today, and through forgiveness of self from God into one another, we're able to find unity in relationships. Because without forgiveness, you won't find unity. If I can't look myself in the eye, I can't look you in the eye. And that's,
I can't show up for an intimate relationship if that stuff hasn't been taken care of. Mm-hmm. I don't think I would have had the ability. Mm-hmm. I had never had an intimate relationship. I can't come from a long line. My grandmother was married 8 times. Mm-hmm. My aunt was 5 times. Yeah. We just cut and run and go get another husband. And that's like a romantic. But I have no friends from childhood. I have no friends from elementary school. I have no I just didn't know how to do that until I got to a place to understand what these principles are. I am able to do that today because of God's power and grace. And obviously he wants that for me because, I got to go give a girl a 20-year chip. She was my second sponsee that stuck. So I have a 27-year sober sponsee, and then Ursula is the second, 20 years.
Shout out Ursula.
It's like every 7 years, God would send me one that stuck, and it was just what a gift last week. I have intimate relationships. I have a sponsee that I've sponsored maybe 7 or 8 years now, and she said I'm the longest relationship she's ever had. I mean,
Ursula is the credit while we're in Tennessee.
She's a pretty special lady.
I want to just add that this is kind of a lesson I've learned with some other stuff in other areas of my life, daddy issues. But it's not just forgiveness is the stepping stone to reconciliation, right? Like, and I'm sure there's another step or another part of the cycle after that, but because even with Renee having made that decision to forgive, and I remember, all that transpiring, there's still, and I say that because there's lots of work to do after, right? Like, I don't want you to think like, and I know she's not trying to portray this, but it is not as though she went unaffected after that.
Oh no.
There was a lot of, tough conversations and a lot of insane conversations. And
I was physically ill. I was spiritually sick. I was terrible.
So for me, like, it seems like that, the cycle is acceptance, and then there's forgiveness, and then there's, if you continue to do the work, there's reconciliation, which is the part I said about true forgiveness is shouldering the other person's debt, is as silly as making chicken parm a second time, with a smile on, that's the reconciliation. That's reconciling the account, if you will. So,
John and I have had an opportunity throughout not just our marriage, but with our parents in that arena, using that same concept and the principle of that, taking care of his mom for 2 years down here and watching, that all kind of, what's the word, play out or even up, or, it just makes right. And both of my parents too. And, doing what I did with my mother, and, John being a huge part of that and bringing her home to die at our house. And, the years and years of work on that relationship, rounds of steps, prayer, action, showing up, and what I did for a lot of years to get to that point. It's not just a one and done to even the scale. It's a lot. It's a lot.
I was just thinking about another question that I have wrote down here, and it says, and this kind of goes along with what you've just shared about, the pain that you guys went through on February 15th, 18 years ago, you said?
2008.
And, okay, so it says, so moving forward, once we get into that space I'm of forgiving, go through all the heartache that it's going to take to get to the other side, because you have to have action in order to forgive, right? And so for today, how do you keep outside pressures of money, status, or opinion, or the opposite sex?
Can I pause there? I would challenge your assertion that you have to have action for forgiveness.
Action for forgiveness. What did I say?
I think that's what you just said.
Yeah, that is what I said.
Yeah, I don't think forgiveness is merit based.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. Go ahead.
I mean, I think forgiveness is
it's an act of heart.
It's a gift.
Gift.
Someone gives you forgiveness. You don't earn it.
So
Sure.
reconciliation maybe is that part.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I was
action
thinking.
Yeah,
side
towards
is,
the healing. Sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Then no, that's a better
I-
description, and I'm
yeah.
glad that we talked about.
Well, I didn't mean to-
So for today, so for this part, it says, how do we keep outside pressures out of the marriage, or pressures, money, status, other people's opinion, opposite sex, from taking priority over our spiritual principles? Right? It's easy to say that we have these spiritual principles and we're going to live by them, but do I know how to apply them in my life, or am I just talking about them? So what does that look like for you guys?
There's a lot of black and white in that, a lot of, I'm unavailable, right? And for a long time in AA, for I don't know, until I was 30 years sober, I really wouldn't talk to a newcomer guy, or and now I'm a grandma, I'm an old timer, I have gray hair, and so like someone like Mason, I can say, I am comfortable, and this is almost 34 years sober, so this is a long time, but for years I stuck with the women. There was never going to be any kind of question, and I because I just respect it so much. I know where I came from. I know what I used other than drugs and alcohol to make myself feel better, and I can't use any of those things anymore, And so, respecting my disease, and it won't come to me, I believe, in a case of Warren Milwaukee's best. It will come to me, I'm a bad wife, he doesn't want me, the kids will pick him over me, they're talking about me, so it's looking for anything. And so if I put all those things you described in that category, it's keeping my disease arrested. It's going to come on all those things you talked about to try to get me separated from God and my husband and what I need to be doing. And so giving my disease the respect it deserves, and just, I can't give it I don't get a lot of wiggle room. I watch people get a lot of wiggle room. And I used to call my sponsor Nancy when this was so much even more. I didn't understand it then. I understand it a little better now, but I still call Cheryl sometimes. It's just not fair. And they're fine. They're happy. They have these great lives, but they scoot along the edge. I don't get to do that. I can't,
Yeah.
I don't feel good. I don't want to do that. I don't want to try to get away with anything. I just know that my disease will use all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For men, I think it's transparency is so big for like the two, like for men, I don't know how women are, but like, when self shows up and it seems like something may be a little enticing or whatever, to talk about it and be like, oh yeah, they got to nip this just to talk about, you get what I mean? Mm-hmm. Cause men, we're wired different than women, so I don't know what that looks like in y'all's life, but for us, it's transparency. I need to know John's just as crazy as I am in a lot of areas. You know what I mean? If not, I don't feel comfortable talking to him about certain stuff. That makes sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sponsor's greatest gift to me is his transparency. He's great at a lot of things, but that's his most valuable trait. But, I think, what you're talking about is an age-old dilemma that's going to stay with all of us until we die, hopefully have less impact in our life. But, Bill talks about it in the traditions, right? Less money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. These are thousands of years old ideals. Thomas Aquinas, one of the great Stoics, had this kind of practice of helping people determine what their biggest pitfall was, their kryptonite, as Ralph talks about. But there's 4 big blockers. There's 4 things that will really, 4 false idols, and I need to figure out which one is the worst distractor for me to keep it kind of in the forefront of my prayer life, in the forefront with others. And they are money, power, prestige, and pleasure. And so how you take these 4 things and figure out which one is, we might like some degree of all of them, but which one is the most dangerous for John Edmonds. And so for me, it's you do it by process of elimination. The first one that I could care less about is power. I don't need to have power. I don't care about power. Like the big joke is when you're the boss and you have employees, well, you're the slave, not the employees. You are, because you have to tell them what to do, right? So power is least important to me. Now, I like pleasure, but in the order of things, that's the next least important. I can sacrifice. I know how to go without. I've done that for years. And so for me, the next two are close: the money and the prestige. For me, the next least important is the money. Again, I've been broke many, many, many times, and I have the foresight to know kind of what's next. That's not forever, but the prestige, in St. Thomas Aquinas' days, they called that honor, but it was prestige. It was egotistical type stuff. That's the biggest blocker for me. The thing that causes me to engage in self the most is that, is the big shotism. And now that, those other things can be used in that quest of big shotism. But one of, when I get to run my mouth a little bit in AA, and what blocks me from being useful in those situations when I am is this prestige idea. I get to do Usual Suspects this year, which is like a popular men's retreat. To me, it's a big deal, and a lot of people really love it. It's got a special place in the Tennessee AA history, and a lot of my favorite AA guys, speakers are going to be there, and so I was getting in my head about it, and I called my buddy Cliff, and I said, man, I really think that my sponsor just asked me to do this just because he loves me, not because he thinks I'm the most qualified candidate to lead the retreat. He's like, man, man, stop. He's like, you're being silly. He's like, you're going to do a really good job. I said, well, I don't want to do a really good job. Mm-hmm. I want a monument crafted the day I leave.
That's right.
I want people to say, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, did you hear that retreat that John and Sheldon did? Like you have to go get a copy. Like that's my ego. That's my desire for prestige. That the pat on the head. Type. That's
parade down.
Yeah, that's because that's
Main Street.
That's attached to my love language, right? And so, it's a long way of saying, it's important to figure out what, is your biggest pothole, because, once I recognize that, then hopefully I can put that aside. It's like, okay, well, this is not about prestige. This is about, because, and Cliff had to remind, we forget what we believe. I'm sober 36 years. I sponsor a lot of guys. I tell them a lot of great stuff, and I forget it instantly. But it takes that transparency that Paul just talked about, and being vulnerable to somebody else and saying, man, this is what's really going on, which I'm not proud that that's going on. I don't like saying that, on a podcast that 4 or 5 people listen to, that, how much the ego plays in and kicks my butt, So, I'll say this, and I know I'm hogging the time. 2 years ago, there's a talk on AA that there's a talk on YouTube that one of my favorite talks, Steve L. does this talk, I'm Not the Man I Think I Am. And incredible talk. And I'm not the man I think I am. Trust me on that. And then, that was evidence last week, in our home group. You witnessed it. I just stand up to my home group, making amends. And if you had asked me the week before that person had told me that I had offended them and said, hey, what is your impact on your home groups? I would have written you somewhere a description between, George Washington and Jesus Christ and Columbus. You know what I mean? That was my impact on my home group, when the reality is, no, that I had hurt my home group, I'm not the man I think I am. And so, the ego does not want you to get up in front of people and say, I owe this group an amends, did something wrong, so, to answer your question of those are lifelong battles that, I think will happen until we're gone, and that's, the dichotomy of God's greatest gift to us is our free will. Sure, go out and chase the shiny stuff.
Right.
But you're going to find it lacking. But when you bring it back to me, that's the gift. That's the only thing that's brought me any lasting feeling of satiety. I've never been satiated. I've had all that material stuff. So it's all proved empty.
Character
Thank
and
you.
community is so big, dude. Just character and community, like principles. Thank God for principles. It gives
One of the biggest gifts of my sobriety, Paul, was something you described when we moved to Tennessee 4 years ago. I ran around here trying to build our community because we had a 30-year one. People would go visit our house after we left. They got married there, done their first fist step there, cried on that porch. They went by just to see it, and it was something that God did at that house. And when you were you were leading a meeting with someone in Maryland, you were asked to do it, and she was describing to you what it was like being around us. And it was what you have that experience with us here, and to know that God still does that through you for a year, that was, I'm still doing it. Our house is still open for God and his kids, and doing that is what brings all this stuff. Our house is not our house. That's God's house, and within our first year, we had a wedding and 2 baby showers, and, it's God's house. This is not us. It's God's money. That's God's son, and not if I forget that, then I'm cutting off something.
It's powerful, yeah. And it goes even like to what with like what John was just saying. Like, granted, we're not discrediting the fact that, like, your sarcasm can get in the way, and you had to make an amends. At the end of the day, like, that's still not the like the impact that y'all and we've all made, on the community is freaking awesome. You know what I mean? Like, it's a community I never even knew existed. All of us have personality traits that get in their freaking way sometimes. So, like, at the end of the day, that's a minor thing versus like really what's happened as a whole. Not to discredit what was just said, but
No, I see what you're saying. I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. I hate to say this. I think Bill uses the wrong word a lot of times when he says fellowship, because it's much deeper than that. What we get in here, I mean, there's a kinship that happens, and you can't have it. You can't have that with 37 people, but you can have it with a handful of people that I love that. I'm embarrassed to say this. I love that Instagram clip with Ben Affleck from the movie The Town. You know what I'm talking about? I can't remember the other guy's name. The guy from Mayor of Kingstown. They're both little gangsters. And Ben shows up. Affleck shows up at his house, knocks on the door. He's watching TV. He's like, "Hey, listen, we're about to go to some really bad stuff to some really bad people. You can't ask any questions, and don't ever talk about it again." And the guy says, "My car or yours?"
Yeah.
And that's what you get in here. Now, hopefully, none of us are, or most of us are past that type of stuff. But you get the idea of like this kinship that, you share. You say it all the time, Paul, and I try to give you credit when I steal it. I talked about this weekend as like we share our lives with each other. This is not,
an hour meeting.
Yeah, this is not. Yeah, it's not just an hour a week or 2 hours a week or 3. But it's not this. It's not preaching or teaching or prophesizing. We share our lives with each other, and our brokenness. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. It's crazy how like God puts, you'll see people get out of a prison setting when they're like, tatted from head to toe, like cold blooded, never cared about anybody his whole life. But God will put it in front of you, and this guy is like interested. He he hears something for the first time. You know what I mean? Like the power, like God bless his sponsorship, right? So that community, the kinship is like, it's like my family, I don't know, my family may have tried to tell me some of this stuff, but I couldn't hear them, right? It's something as simple as like what I was sharing. Like when I remember exactly where we're at. We were out in front of the town social over here when you asked me about ideals, I had to act like I probably knew what I was talking about. You get what I mean? But at the end of the day, it's like you hear people, like you're drawn, like, what is this? What is this? And that's the kinship I think that you're talking about. Like, it's crazy how like you just take these messed up individuals and all of a sudden, like, God does God stuff, and it's like you put a person right in your life where it's like, wow. It's funny because I'll get like, I was talking about this morning earlier when we did a different episode where like when you're sitting in the meeting and you're looking at the guy and you realize like he's there because God has something you need to say to this guy. You get what I mean? Like you're supposed to go up to that guy and talk to him or girl, whoever it is, right? It's like, man, you're drawn to this, right? And it may not ever work out. You get what I mean? But you got that little nudge and you took it. It's crazy just how like what happens to those experiences. So yeah. All right, y'all. We've been going about an hour and 16 minutes. Does anybody want to finish this up with anything?
Lisa, did you have anything to add? Did you want to talk about sex, girl? No, I'm just
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Yeah.
No, yeah, like that's the kicker, right? 30, how many years you been married?
Be 30 in October, but we've been together, 32?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do we keep it alive? It's easy to say like, oh, okay, it's Saturday night, assume the position.
I'll tell you something, that is one area until maybe now in our 50s, because there's some, you physically, you lose all your hormones. It's out of your control, right? But I'm telling you, it was the one area of our life, like God just blessed us to be together there and compatible there. And that part has not been a challenge until just some physical stuff. But spiritually, I would say, what do you say?
I think that I think what Renee said is dead on. I mean, I'll spell it out a little bit more specific. I mean, in recent years, if two people have are seeking the same direction, and are both seeking God's will and seeking the other, like Bill says, putting the other person's well-being, first, and but her hormones have gone, as any woman post-menopause, 57 years old, hormones going one way, and I take testosterone bioidentical pellets to, I'd gotten really heavy and was losing a lot of muscle mass years ago, and it taken a long time. And so anyways, I've got the testosterone level of a 25-year-old, and so, we had to find a middle ground. I was like, all right, well, the frequency is a lot different than it used to be. And so it's like, okay, finding, I don't want to say a middle ground or balance, because I hate that word, but, I had to be real with myself and like, okay, and lower my testosterone level. And there's been some other, differences we've had in the past, but it's just, it's just good communication, and we've both enjoyed that part of our life together for a long time. So
I mean, to say that you still, when he walks in the meeting, if I'm already there, I still get butterflies when he walks in a room, and it's not because of anything other than the respect that I have for him and the spiritual connection that we have. And, I mean, this man has been an incredible father to my kids, all three of my kids. He adopted Brenna when she was in second grade. You wouldn't know which one, was the adopted child growing up or in any way, shape, or form. She has his eyes because she has blue eyes and I have brown eyes. So they used to always say, "Oh, she got your eyes." And he'd say, "Yeah, she got my eyes." And, and so it's just, when you share that, and that's what, thinking about 18 years ago, these last 18 years is why I still get butterflies when he walks in the room. When you share all of that and you get through all of that and, you lose your dad and you're on the floor, next to his body and your husband's down holding you on the floor with you, like that's the stuff that makes that better. When you're standing over, your husband's dying mother, and we're holding and praying right over top of her, that's what makes all that better. Why would I want to share that with anyone else?
Right. It's deeper than sex.
Yeah.
Way
It's deeper than
physical.
Yeah,
correct.
way deeper.
Yeah. That's what I hear.
Yeah, it's interesting because, for men, sex is a very visual, it's a physical thing, and for women, and I'm making some broad brushstrokes here, so forgive me, but with women, it's certainly an emotional act, a more emotional act, and so it's like merging those together, I think, is what Renee's talking about. But I remember, like many years ago, in one of my I'm going to get fit phases, I sent her I was reading Men's Health or something, and I had 20 different men's physiques, like the super duper 0% body fat guy, he's number one, and all the way down to the dad bod number 20, where no definition or whatever, and I was and so I sent her a picture of that page in the magazine. I said, which one do you think is the sexiest? And I think we were actually talking. I don't think it was a text. It may have been a text. It doesn't matter. And I remember her reply was, "You know what I think is sexy?" And I said, "I'm like, all right, let me write this down because I'm going to make whatever this is, I'm about to make happen." And I don't know if you remember this conversation. And she said, "Kindness." I was like, "Oh,
Of course she did.
man.
Of course she did.
I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble." Not that not a kind person, but so
Yeah.
it's hard, man, because we are so different, and magically so, and beautifully so,
I mean, when John tells me, he loves me and I'm, the most godly woman he knows, or I'm godly, or some of the beautiful ways that he tells me about myself, then I'm like, well, how can I then be the vixen if he's like, I don't want to be too godly, but you can, it's a mix of everything.
Yeah.
It's a mix of everything. I can still be Nona. I can still be the grandma, but, she left the kids in Kentucky and now I'm home. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Nice. I love that.
The biggest pothole for any marriage relationship is self.
Sure.
That's it.
It's something that's just as simple. It sounds so trite, but it really is.
Yeah.
If all I'm worried about is my sexual pleasure and my what I want, and or my any type of pleasure, you're gonna be in collusion with everybody.
And I may be misspoken here, but and Paul, you can edit this out if you don't want it here, but he and I went through something very similar as I crossed the threshold into perimenopause, and he was taking testosterone. It was a very trying time, and it wasn't because of it was. I can remember telling him I don't know what's happening with my body. This is not me. This is not what you signed up for. It's not what I signed up for. I don't understand what's going on. I need to see a doctor. And it was a very difficult time in our relationship because neither one of us understood. My parents were super private people.
Oh, we
To
didn't
this
talk about
day,
that.
I don't
Yeah.
even know if they've ever had. They have 5 children. I couldn't tell you if they actually ever had sex. I don't know.
I think they did. Lisa.
I think so. But like in the last, my mom, if I called her right now and said, "Mom, what do you think? What is menopause?" Like, she'll say, "I never went through that. I don't even know what you're talking about." She doesn't know. They don't know, and I was never.
They had 5 kids, but she never took her nightgown off.
That's right.
But you know,
That's
it's
right.
exactly all the things we've talked about in the last hour and whatever. All of it is discovery.
Yeah.
You know, we're still discovering, we're still understanding, we're still figuring it out. You know, I've never been a 57-year-old woman before.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I've had the wild years. I've had the,
Oh, yeah.
you know, hanging from the chandelier, you know, all that. And now I'm 57 and what works now? What is
Yeah.
important now?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll continue. I know it'll continue to change. So am I looking, and John and I pointed in the same direction?
Mm-hmm.
You know, are me and my girls still looking to see what can we read this month? What can we do
Right.
this month? You know, what can we learn this month? What can we
Right.
uncover? You know, where can we go help somebody? Not stop.
You got to stay a seeker.
Correct.
Yeah, and thank God that like what we talked about earlier was our feelings aren't really the most important thing.
Correct.
Because
Right.
like in the midst of all that process, holy crap.
They're not always the facts.
You know what I mean? Like
They are we feel them. They're there, but
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
not
yeah.
always the fact.
just because something, I have enough experience and evidence in my life that the power of God is always moving.
There was a
And,
guy,
you know,
Disease Charlie, in a place we got sober, and he used to say, well, you know, in the Bible it talked about, you know, or in the big book it talked about sex being good. So he, you know, there are beautiful things in the Bible about it, you know. It's so, you know, it's supposed to be part of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice. All right. Y'all
That
feel
went fast.
Yeah, y'all feel good about this?
Feel great.
Want to add anything else before we finish?
No, I'm great.
Okay.
This was wonderful. I didn't think all my questions. I have a few extra ones, but I think we got the most of them.
Volume 2.
Volume 2.
Yeah, we'll do another one. And for the listeners, if anybody can relate or is going through anything that we've talked about that you think may be helpful to contact any of us, feel free to send us an email, recoveryrecording615. You can also go back on the page on the channel, and Renee and John both have had episodes, so you can go back and check out some of their content, as well as Lisa. So there it is. Thank you, everybody. And until next time, have a good night.
Good night.
Hello, and welcome back to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast, where we explore the ongoing journey of recovery and the spiritual growth that comes with it. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hey everyone, it's Paul from Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast with a quick note before we get started with this episode. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for an entire year now. It's been such an amazing experience getting to know everybody. We already have the majority of 2026 booked up, and we have a lot of great guests scheduled. We don't make any money off YouTube or any of the other platforms. This podcast is completely self-supporting, and we've spent a lot of money, time, and energy into it, simply just because we love doing it. We're not trying to make a profit, but we are trying to cover our upcoming expenses if that's at all possible. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can make a contribution at our Venmo, which is Recovery Recordings 615. We'd like to keep this commercial free. Thank you.